The 2nd of February, 1943, Stalingrad, the Soviet Union. The German Sixth Army, after 5 months of fierce fighting and heavy casualties, having exhausted their ammunition and food, finally capitulates, making it the first of Hitler's field armies to surrender during World War II. The battle for the city proves a decisive psychological turning point, ending a string of German victories in the summer of 1942 and beginning the long retreat westward. The Soviet army remains on the offensive, and in July 1944 liberates Majdanek, the first major Nazi camp to be liberated, which is located in German-occupied Poland. Soviet officials invite journalists to inspect the camp and to see for themselves the evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. As Allied and Soviet troops move across Europe against Nazi Germany in 1944 and 1945, they encounter concentration camps, mass graves, and other sites of Nazi crimes. The unspeakable conditions the liberators confront shed light on the full scope of Nazi horrors. One of the most infamous perpetrators of this criminal Nazi regime responsible for these atrocities is Alice Orlowski. Alice Minna Elisabeth Elling was born on the 30th of September 1903 in Berlin, then part of the German Empire. She was a daughter of a chief tax inspector and attended a lyceum in Berlin. While she was still a teenager, she gave birth to an illegitimate child, and after that, she was kicked out of her parents' house. Due to financial reasons, she dropped out of medical school after several semesters, and then she worked as a mannequin. In 1934, 1 year after Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power, she married a nobleman and businessman, Georg Orlowski, who was a Russian refugee from Odessa. They ran a leather goods shop together, but after they divorced in 1936, Alice lived with her mother. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939. In 1941, Orlowski was deployed in the Ravensbrück concentration camp. Opened in May 1939, Ravensbrück was the only major women's camp established by the Nazis. Ravensbrück was staffed both by SS men, who served as guards and administrators, and by 150 women, who served as supervisors. These female supervisors were either SS volunteers or women who had taken the job for the good pay and working conditions. Ravensbrück also housed a training camp for female SS guards, who were instructed how to handle the prisoners that they were going to supervise. These prisoners would have to work until they died, and the task of their supervisors was to get the maximum amount of work out of them whilst they were still alive. Ravensbrück thus also became a training center or a school of violence for about 3,500 female guards who went on to serve either there or at other concentration camps. One such guard was Alice Orlowski, who in October 1942 was selected as one of the guards to be posted at the Majdanek camp located near Lublin in German-occupied Poland. During the entire period of its existence, the Majdanek camp was under construction. Construction on the camp began in October 1941 with the arrival of about 2,000 Soviet prisoners of war. However, most of them were too weak to work, and virtually all were dead by February 1942. Majdanek primarily served to concentrate Jews, whom the Germans spared temporarily for forced labor. It occasionally functioned as a killing site to murder victims who could not be killed at other killing centers such as Belzec, Sobibor, or Treblinka. It also contained a storage depot for property and valuables taken from the Jewish victims of the killing centers. Like other concentration camps in the Reich, Majdanek also served as a killing site for targeted groups of individuals, including members of the Polish resistance, hostages taken from the security police prison in Lublin, and prisoners in the camp itself who were deemed no longer capable of work. In the winter of 1941 to 1942, camp authorities began to use Zyklon B gas to murder prisoners too weak to work in a makeshift gas chamber. Mass murder operations using poison gas at Majdanek began in October 1942 and continued until the end of 1943. There were 3 gas chambers at Majdanek. At least 2 were shower rooms reconfigured for the use of Zyklon B gas. At least one of these 2 was used to kill human beings. Shortly after Orlowski arrived at the camp, she gained a reputation as one of the most feared guards. She wore an SS men's uniform and a big pistol fixed to her hip. Orlowski also carried on her a powerful whip with a hard handle, flexible at the end, with which she beat prisoners. According to Jan Wozniak, a political prisoner, who served at the camp from February 1942 till January 1943, Orlowski would often approach her victims from the back by surprise. When she noticed someone break off work, even for a second, she immediately beat and tortured the victim. Wozniak witnessed firsthand as Orlowski in some cases tortured prisoners to the point that they died from the blows that she dealt them. There were around 150 such cases over the said period. Orlowski would first hit the victim with a whip, coiling it around their neck and then pulling them to the ground, and all this was followed by a systematic beating and kicking until the victim had enough and died. Such prisoners were then moved to the crematorium. Because Orlowski had a reputation for cruelty, prisoners would try to avoid her, and it would sometimes happen that a prisoner managed to shake her off. But in many cases, Orlowski turned to the capos for help, who captured the escapee, and she would then kill the victim. Another witness, Edmund Heininger, worked at the Majdanek camp laundry as a clerk and bookkeeper from 1942 to April 1944. He would also remember Orlowski, who at that time was supervising the girl unit at the laundry, as a sadist because she mistreated and tortured the prisoners. Once, after beating someone, she returned to the room that he was in, and after a while, she was about to leave to beat another prisoner. Edmund Heininger snatched the whip from her hand, broke it, and threw it into the stove. He told her that the commandant forbade the beating because prisoners, when beaten, were unable to work efficiently. He threatened to report her to the commandant if she continued the beating. Surprised at what he had done, she cried, "Do you know, you bandit, what you have done? I could crush you with this boot." During the spring of 1944, the SS evacuated most of the prisoners to the concentration camps further west. In late July 1944, as Soviet forces approached Lublin, the remaining camp staff hastily abandoned Majdanek. However, in their urgency to flee the camp, they neglected to destroy most of the prisoner barracks and the gas chambers. When the Soviet army liberated the camp on the 24th of July, 1944, it was virtually intact, and only a few hundred Jewish prisoners remained alive. Soviet officials invited journalists to inspect the camp and see the evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. Between 80 and 120,000 people perished in Majdanek between October 1941 and July 1944, when the camp was operational. When the Soviet army liberated Majdanek, Orlowski was already serving in the Płaszów concentration camp, where she had been sent in April 1944. The Płaszów camp was established in 1942 under the authority of the SS and police leaders in Kraków. It was initially a forced labor camp for Jews. The original site of the camp included 2 Jewish cemeteries. From time to time, the SS enlarged the camp, and it reached its maximum size in 1944, the same year that it became a concentration camp. Until that time, most of the camp guards were Ukrainian police auxiliaries, chosen from the Soviet soldiers in the German prisoner of war camps, and trained at the Travniki training camp in Lublin. In the camp, Alice Orlowski was commonly known and nicknamed by the prisoners as Chłopczyca, or Tomboy, for her masculine physical appearance. Orlowski was an alcoholic, liked vodka, and often seemed insane. Sometimes she worked herself into a frenzy and tortured prisoners whom she filled with terror. A former Płaszów prisoner, Bronisława Malawer, who served at the Płaszów camp from January to October 1944 and survived the war, later testified about an incident which exposed the darker side of Orlowski's personality. In June, there was a roll call during which the prisoners, who had been determined unfit for work, were separated from the rest, and then these inmates were deported to Auschwitz crematoriums. During the roll call, Orlowski supervised a group of some 150 children, aged from 6 to 10 years. Orlowski grabbed a 6-year-old child by the legs and banged the head of the child against the block stone threshold until she killed the little one. On a different occasion, during a roll call, Orlowski went down the lines of prisoners, and when she noticed anyone crying, she whipped him or her without mercy. She would regularly load trucks of women destined for the gas chambers. When a child was left over, she would throw him or her on top of the adults like luggage and bolt the door shut. As the Soviet army approached in the summer of 1944, the Germans prepared to dismantle the Płaszów camp. The SS transferred prisoners to other concentration camps in Germany and Austria. Others were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau killing center and murdered there. Among the guards deployed from Płaszów to Auschwitz was also Alice Orlowski. When she arrived at the camp, her reputation as a brutal sadist preceded her. According to Józefa Wozniak, who served at Auschwitz from 1942 until its evacuation in 1945, Orlowski was dreaded at the camp because of her cruelty and maltreatment of the prisoners. She beat prisoners either with a rod she carried or with her own hand, on the face, or alternatively she kicked people with her black high boots. According to Wozniak, on one occasion, Orlowski beat a young Polish Jewess because she was holding a piece of Swedish turnip she had found. She kicked her with full force, threw her to the ground, picked her up, and then kicked her again. As Soviet forces were advancing and liberating territories, the Nazis attempted to hide evidence of their atrocities and prevent prisoners from falling into enemy hands. In January 1945, as Soviet forces approached Auschwitz, the camp authorities decided to evacuate the remaining prisoners. Around 60,000 prisoners, primarily Jews, were forced to march in harsh winter conditions, enduring extreme cold, hunger, and exhaustion. They were marched westward, away from the advancing Soviet forces, towards other concentration camps such as Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, and Dachau. The march was characterized by brutal treatment, with prisoners often beaten or shot if they could not keep up or if they fell. Many prisoners died along the way due to exhaustion, exposure, or being killed by the guards. These forced marches of concentration camp prisoners became known as the Death Marches. In mid-January 1945, Orlowski was among the SS women posted on the death march from Auschwitz to Loslau. At the time, it was obvious to most Germans that the war was lost, and it was during this time that her behavior, previously observed as being brutal and sadistic, suddenly became more humane. During the march, Orlowski gave comfort to the inmates and even slept alongside them on the ground outside. She also brought water to those who were thirsty. After the war ended, in May 1945, Orlowski was captured by Soviet forces and extradited to Poland to stand trial for the crimes she had committed during the war. She was tried at the Auschwitz trial, which began on the 24th of November 1947 and lasted 1 month. Her changed behavior at the end of the war saved her from being hung, and unlike her Nazi comrade Maria Mandl, who received a death sentence, Orlowski was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In the end, however, she was released in 1957 after serving only 10 years, and then she moved to West Germany. In 1973, while working in Cologne, Orlowski made a remark complaining that only half the work had been completed, making a reference to the extermination of the Jews. As a result, she was arrested, charged with making anti-Semitic statements, and a West German court found her guilty of hate speech, sentencing her to 10 months in prison, of which she served 8 months. In 1975, Orlowski was arrested for a second time by the West German authorities, this time for crimes committed in Majdanek. When she was facing the third Majdanek trial and justice was about to be served, Orlowski died of natural causes on the 21st of May, 1976. She was 72 years old. There were no tears shed for Alice Orlowski. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.